Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Mr. Designs Cypher. It also comes in the D Cypher, which is the drop point version of the knife. I'll link it down in the description. You guys can check it out. Thanks to Mr. Designs for sending this in for me to take a look at. You can check out their Instagram right here. This particular knife is OEM'd, obviously designed by Mr. Designs, but the OEM is Bestech. Just wanted to make sure you guys know that right off the bat. Thank you so much for sending this in so that I can take a look at it and share it with you guys. Or my audience. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this knife. The overall length of the Cypher is coming in at about 8 1/8. Yeah, that's what I'm going to call it. Blade length, a little over 3.5 inches, actually about 3.6 inches blade length, or cutting edge length is about 3.45, not quite 3.5. How about some size comparisons? Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others, up against the 8010 and the 8020.5. This is what I would call a full-size knife. Now, it is much more compact and lightweight due to the nature of this design, which I'm sure that you guys have figured out is very reminiscent of another popular design. We're going to talk about that here in just a moment. But it is a, it's a full-size knife. So close to the overall length of something like the 8010, but absolutely nowhere near as robust. Obviously much larger than something like the 8020.5. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3, which is tucked away for some reason. There we go. And obviously, even though it's close to the same overall length as the PM2, it is way longer in terms of the cutting edge. So there you go. Up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca, which is also tucked away for some reason. There we go. Alrighty. How's the action on this knife? There's only one means of deployment. And that means of deployment is a very low profile flipper tab, which I don't always love because they don't always feel great. They don't always, part of outside of the convenience of deploying a knife, it should also be satisfying. It should be convenient, it should be simple, and it should be satisfying. Not all low profile flipper tabs are like that. Fortunately, this does have a detent that is tuned correctly, so it actually works really, really well. The one means of deployment it has is really satisfying. I'll let you guys take a look at this. Part of the reason is it's jimped properly. There's the right amount of traction to get it to deploy, so that's really nice. Access to the nested steel lock bar is actually all right. It's a little thin in here, but it's not incredibly pinchy. It takes a certain amount of pressure to get it, like when I feel like I've got it out of the way, it's not quite clearing the detent ball, so sometimes I go to, disengage it and it does this. And I'm like, oh, I have to push it a little bit further. So that's more of an adjustment thing than it is a flaw. It just takes a little more pressure than you might realize, but not a lot, right? The knife is going to drop. The initial sharpened edge will come down. No matter how close you are to the lower portion of the blade, it's going to contact your finger if you like to do the one-handed sort of drop. Sorry, my fingernails are gross, but you can see there, kind of where it's impacting. Not that big of a deal. There's not a lot of weight coming down with this blade because it's very, very thin, but there isn't any double clutch, which is, for the most part, what I look for. Ideally, we would have more of a forward choil area right here so that what came down and contacted your finger, if you like to disengage your knife like me. Obviously, you can do the normal sane human being thing and just hold onto the blade and then close it. But if you're like me and you like to do this with one hand, it would have been nice to have a little bit more of an area right there, something else that could contact your finger outside of sharpened edge, but okay, not that big of a deal, right? This isn't a massive blade, so there's essentially no risk of injury. You have to really be doing something stupid in order for that to happen. But as a stupid person, I can tell you that happens quite often with knives. Anyways, I don't find any real issue with this engagement. It's just a little bit of an adjustment process. Let's do carry profile, length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3. This is a thin knife. Wow, super duper thin. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. Even though this is a full-size knife, it is incredibly compact and actually feels more compact than something like the Para 3 because of the material choice and just the general compact nature of it. So you do get a lot of blade for not a lot of object taking up space in your pocket. Let's go ahead and weigh it. What are we looking at for materials here? We are looking at a hand rub satin finished M390 blade. What's the HRC? Bestech tends to be anywhere from 59 all the way up to 62. So they are definitely capable of it. If you look up Bestech knives and M390, here more recently, you'll see examples of them hitting that 60 to 62 territory where M390 should be. But it wouldn't surprise me if the HRC range is something like 59 to 61, which seems to be the industry standard, and certainly a range that Bestech has been hitting in the past. To Mr. Designs, it would be really nice if you put the actual HRC range on your website so that people knew for sure. This is a super thin geometry blade, so the geometry of this M390 is definitely going to assist in cutting, but getting it to that sweet 60 to 62 when we're talking about a pocket knife, right? That would be absolutely ideal. I had no issues with the edge like fatiguing early during use. When I carry and test knives for review, I'm just carrying them and using them like a normal person, so they're not like being taken out and like being batoned through logs or anything like that. But cutting up some cardboard and just doing like regular tasks, it behaved the same way that typical M390 behaves when it is heat treated to that typical zone. So I didn't really have an issue with it. Generally, if it's super soft or way under that range, you notice immediately. Had an issue with a Sativian knife once where just a few passes through cardboard, it immediately lost its edge, and that's usually your indicator that it's not heat treated properly. But this guy's fine. I trust Bestech. Bestech has been thoroughly tested by many members of our community in the past, and they tend to be right there within that zone. So anyways, M390 blade, hand rub satin finish blade. We have some beautiful carbon fiber, really, really nice. Not that flat, shiny stuff. Man, I hate that. But really, really nice, kind of like a marbly carbon fiber that is subtly contoured. Very important to point that out. Subtle contouring here. Really, really nice. And then we have a nested steel liner, I believe. No, actually on both sides, which is good. Nice to have that carbon fiber backed up with steel. Nested liner on both sides that is milled out for weight reduction. So remember, 8.1 inches or so. Your weight on this guy coming in at 3.7, which is about perfect considering it's a 3.6 inch blade. So ratios are really fantastic here. Your balance is actually a bit back from the pivot, but given that the scales and the whole knife just isn't heavy to begin with, it really doesn't feel like it's off or anything like that. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'm going to get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools on this channel. Your pivot is going to be a T8, and your body screws are also going to be T8 with the pocket clip screw, the one pocket clip screw also being a T8. Look how they did this. The wraparound wire clip. Now, the wire clip isn't everybody's favorite, and it's not my favorite, but the way that they did this is very, very good and very accommodating for left-handed people. Wraps around, slots into the carbon fiber with just one screw on each side, and look at that. We don't have to look at any sort of eyesore, any filler tab, any sort of pocket that's milled out on top of the scale. Nope. You just put it into the side that you want, and you're good to go. Incredibly simple disassembly. You just need a T8, and you need to take the pivot and 4 screws out, and you are in. Very, very nice. As long as you have the right tools for the job, these, you're good to go. It doesn't have to be these, but these are great. I mean, come on. I know tons of you guys have these. I know tons of you have these. They're fantastic. That set will allow you to disassemble like 99% of pocket knives. But anyways, let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness. That was me slapping my leg. Wearing sweatpants. You can identify the impact sound of sweatpants. Those are the pants I'm wearing. Okay. The blade stock thickness. Woo, boy. Is that even on the flat? Yeah, it has to be. I think about 87 thousandths. Ooh, man, that is a thin blade for sure. 87 thousandths. All right, meat and potatoes. That looks like the TRM. It sure does. Yes, it does. It is a little close, especially the drop point one. Wow. Really, really similar in that department. Probably a couple of lines should have been changed so that it was, I mean, it is not exact. Like if you hold them up together or you look at two images side by side, they're not exact. This is just very, very reminiscent, right? Now, usually this causes people who don't never even plan to buy the knife or the knife that it's copying. It usually causes them to raise their pitchforks and their torches. And I would say, calm down and ask yourself if you were even interested in this or the original in the first place. That should eliminate about 95% of complainers. Just, be honest, all right? Now, for everybody who's left over, who legitimately wanted to pick this up or has the original and is kind of like, hey, whoa, what's going on, right? I understand, the issue there. This is really, really close. It's not an exact duplicate. We do have plenty of examples of this, in the knife world where something is close, right? People often call this copying. The real issue in the knife world is when a clone is is a duplication of something. Like if you go to AliExpress and you buy a duplication, like a less expensive duplicate, it's like a D2 Shirogorov, right? It is a one for one, line for line duplication. And then they're slapping the Shirogorov logo on there. That's the worst thing. That is that. I would rather give up knives than carry something like that. I think that is shameful, right? The second thing that happens that is also, I would call it bad, is when a company doesn't steal the logo, but they just rip the design off like line for line, right? These are the issues. Now, what a lot of people mistake for this type of offense is like, hey, CJRB, or actually, to imitate them, they would put those letters backwards. CRJB has the pyrite and it looks kind of like the bug out. That's a copy. That's the type of smooth brain dribble that, people say is the same type of, offense as copying. And it isn't, right? This is a lot of that is the same type of people who never really had any interest in buying that or the original in the first place. And they're just sort of conditioned to point it out or complain about it, right? When it's not really even something that they're concerned with anyway, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that this is a little close, and it is kind of like, hey, maybe we should have done a couple of things to really differentiate this from the TRM products. Which also, if we're being fair, the TRM knife handle is pretty straightforward and traditional, and the blade is certainly not unique. I mean, it's not like they invented that blade. It's just the overall aesthetic, the combination of things is incredibly similar here, and the only changes are the fact that we have a Tanto option, which I don't think you have with TRM, and then you have these carbon fiber scales, right? It's different enough that you can't say it is a duplication, which would have definitely been an issue. The lines are not identical, but I feel like this was at least inspired by that. And if there is inspiration behind something, I think it's always worth pointing out. But yeah, so there's that. Cats, that's the elephant in the room. We've talked about it. I'm sure that it'll get discussed infinitely down in the comment section. But no, this is not a clone. It's not a duplication, right? That's the type of thing that people get really upset about and that actually causes a problem in the knife world, right? When lines are similar in a world of knives where you really only have so many options, right? You're going to have things that are reminiscent of other things sometimes. It has to go in your hand and the blade has to be a shape that can cut, right? And as many times as designers and OEMs go outside of those lines a little bit, they're still all pretty much confined by the same types of things, right? So it's going to happen every now and then. It's not worth a pitchfork and torches kind of reaction. So anyways, ergonomically, yeah, it's pretty good. For a thin knife, usually that creates a little bit of a ledge issue where it's it's not super comfortable. Not bad. The carbon fiber feels good. It definitely feels like you're holding a capable object despite it being thin and lightweight, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the liners are backed up. The scales are backed up with steel. I really would have liked to see titanium in there, especially for the price. We are going to talk about that price tag for sure, but yeah, the fit and finish on this is great, and I do love a lot of any of the marks here you're seeing are just from what I was cutting or fingerprints or anything. The blade's actually just fine. I do love the satin finish on this, or the hand rub satin finish. I think that's really, really nice. The jimping is absolutely functional, and there's a nice little choke up spot right here. The edge is definitely thin. Definitely. If you really like Tantos, this is kind of a cool way to do a Tanto. I like that, how it kind of tapers down here and is wider out of the tip. But if you want the more straightforward version of this knife, the more utilitarian version, definitely the version that's going to be easier to touch up, I would go with the drop point blade. Both cool though, both going to be super thin behind the edge. This one's just going to be a little bit trickier to sharpen, given you have to change the angle to get both edges here. And because this is perfectly straight, it's not curved. So some of your more generic slicing tasks are going to be made easier with the drop point version. Bestech always does a really good job, so the edge is perfectly even on both sides. It all just feels great. But would have been not 100% absolutely necessary. It would have been an element that would have helped with that price tag if the liners were titanium. But more on that here in just a second. No lanyard hole, who cares? I believe that that backspacer is titanium, but let's take a look. No, I'm wrong. It's steel. That's part of the reason why it's a little bit butt heavy. Backspacer and liners, that would have been really nice to see titanium. The wire clip is incredibly functional, works really well. I love that it's short. That's really aiding in the ergonomic comfort department. A lot of people are, why is a pocket clip so short? I feel like it's gonna fall out of my pocket. It's not going to. I'll tell you why. Because the amount of material between the clip and the scales pinching to your pocket is essentially the same regardless of the length of the clip. The scenario in which the length of the clip is what keeps the knife in your pocket or determines whether or not the knife comes out of your pocket is essentially a non-existent scenario unless you plan on being upside down. If you are a vampire, you might, I guess, maybe need a longer clip. Does it even help in that scenario? I find that to be a ridiculous argument, and I don't think the people making it have actually thought about it. The reason that I like short clips is because it creates for better ergonomic comfort and essentially keeps the knife in your pocket exactly the same way. I suppose the amount of travel in and out of your pocket is slightly different, which again would only result in you losing the knife if you are upside down a lot. Anyways, I don't think that that's a valid argument, but I guess if you want to give me that argument again, or give me your reasoning behind that argument, then I suppose. I think it has a lot more to do with the shape of the bill and how much of it is contacting, right? The tension of the pocket clip. This is fine. It should do just fine. Short clips have been around for a long time, and I can't imagine that there's much data that suggests short clips result in people losing their knives more often than long clips. But if you have that data, let me know. The material here, as far as I know, there is no other option. So it is a slippery carbon fiber surface. The lock-in is okay. The surface is going to be a little bit slippery, but yeah, you might notice that there's not an incredible amount of traction on this. The stop pin is actually, can we see it? Yeah, it's right there. So there's actually a slot on the blade it's milled out. So that stop pin can work on the top and bottom portions of that inside the blade. But locked out, there is no blade play up, down, left, or right. The knife runs on bearings, by the way. No lock stick, no pivot lash, very smooth and consistent in here, and the appropriate detent for this size of blade and, the size of the flipper tab. Also perfectly centered with no blade play. Okay, so why is it $275? That's really high. Do I think it's high? Yes, absolutely. I know for sure that Bestech and other similar companies, when they are working with designers, they make it really difficult to do a small batch of anything. A lot of times people point right at the designers and they say, you are greedy. You obviously made this price this way. Not so much. This is way more often it is Bestech or whoever, We Knives, Riot, right? They're saying, oh, you only want to do a small batch? Okay, so you're going to be charged quite a bit more. The only time that you get a substantial enough discount to, compete directly with, like when Riot or Bestech or we or whoever releases like their own in-house design that they make like thousands of, well, yeah, then they're going to be a lot lower, right? They make it to where it is, you can't really compete with their in-house stuff unless you order a humongous batch. And by the way, if you don't know, you can't just waltz up the Best Deck and be like, hey, can you guys like make me 1,000 of these? Like, just trust me, they're going to be super popular. You have to pay in to do that kind of thing. And what they charge you to do that is kind of crazy from what I understand. So they don't leave an enormous amount of room for these designers to make profit, right? They force you to go on volume, right? I mean, they're a business too, the OEMs, so they're gonna make sure that they're gonna win no matter what, right? But oftentimes when you see a price tag that doesn't make sense, right? If you're like, I could go get a Best Deck, but just directly through Best Deck, get the same materials for less money. Well, yeah, that's by design. So I don't love the price tag, but I'm not blaming Mr. Mister for it because I've heard of this happening a lot, right? It's not fair, but it is what it is, right? So yeah, it's hard to justify it at that price tag. I guess if you really, really like the TRM look, it's still hard there because the TRM is not really that much different in terms of price, right? So this is a hard one to justify. It's made well. If you just specifically love the look of this one, then sure, then go for it. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with the quality. The quality is there. I think the balance is good. It'll make for good. I don't know why I said it like that, but the tool is good, right? There's nothing wrong with it. It's got some disappointing things like the lack of a titanium backspacer and what I think for the price tag should have been titanium liners. But again, they're probably not really working with fair rules here. So it's cool. Check it out if you want to. It's just really hard with that price tag. I think, obviously this would have been a lot better at something like $200. But do I think that they could have gotten it there and actually made any money off of it? No, I don't think so. I think that that's Best Deck, taking the vast majority of that. So yeah, that's what I think. So that's going to be pretty much it today, guys. Thanks again to Mr. Mister for sending this in. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.